What if we're not the only technological species on Earth? No, don't side-eye the person next to you. I'm pretty sure they're human. I'm talking about a whole advanced society that might have lived millions of years before us and then vanished. Yeah, it's a bold theory, but it's possible. Which brings up a big question. If they really existed, would we even be able to tell? Because, let's be honest, we are fascinated by the idea of finding intelligent life on other planets. So much so, we almost ignore the possibility that an advanced civilization might have existed right here on Earth. Long before humans evolved. Before dinosaurs even. And there might be hidden clues pointing to them. But where? That's exactly what the Silurian hypothesis tries to figure out. The name Silurian comes from an advanced extraterrestrial race on the TV show, Doctor Who. But the real-world idea is a little different. Scientists aren't really asking whether a pre-human civilization existed or not. They're asking something trickier. If they did exist, would we have any way of knowing? In other words, do we even have the necessary tools to find out? You see, it is possible they did exist. Take the human race, for example. We started building industries and using machines back in the 18th century. Our technology has come a long way since then, and it's grown to the point that, well, it's giving us a bit of trouble right now. All that progress is starting to impact the planet's climate and ecosystems. And if things keep going that way, one day, humanity could disappear. Sure, it's an apocalyptic, hypothetical scenario, but hey, it's just to illustrate the theory, okay? So let's picture today's world without humans around to keep things running. At first, nothing would really change. But slowly, little problems would start to snowball. Oil refineries and nuclear plants might keep going for a while until a jam here, a broken valve there, and suddenly disaster strikes with explosions, smoke, and fire tearing through the sky. Over time, pavement would split open, letting tiny green sprouts poke through. A few seasons later, those sprouts would grow into weeds, then bushes, and eventually trees strong enough to tear roads apart. At some point, our concrete jungles would turn into real green ones. And it wouldn't stop there. Bridges, buildings, entire skylines would crumble. Even the things we think will last forever, like plastic, would, over time, be swallowed by the Earth. Fast forward a few 100 million years, and Earth has completely resurfaced. Any direct evidence of our society would be long gone. Fossil evidence would fade away, and thanks to erosion and shifting tectonic plates, even our biggest cities would vanish in the blink of an eye, at least in geological terms. Now imagine Earth becomes home to a brand new intelligent civilization, and the scientists of this future species are trying to prove that we, humans, once existed. Let me tell you, they would have a ton of work ahead of them. That's because without any actual human-made objects left behind, they'd have to look for the geological fingerprints of our activities. In other words, features in rocks or minerals that tell scientists what happened on Earth long ago. They might check for unusual spikes of carbon, for example, but even then, the clues wouldn't be crystal clear, for reasons I will get to in a second. For now, my point is, it'd be just as hard for us to uncover traces of an ancient technological species. We wouldn't find any statues, no buildings, because nothing will be left standing after millions of years. Still, if they existed, they would have had the same basic needs as modern humans. They'd need to generate massive amounts of energy and grow tons of food. And that would have left behind similar geological fingerprints. Things like big spikes in atmospheric carbon, sudden climate shifts, rising sea levels. And if we ever found any of those traces, bingo! That could mean a pre-human intelligent civilization once existed. Sounds easy, right? Well, that's where the Silurian hypothesis comes in. Back in 2018, two scientists decided to put that idea to the test. Physicist Adam Frank and climate modeler Dr. Gavin Schmidt wanted to answer one big question. If an advanced civilization lived on Earth long ago, would we even be able to tell? And the answer is, well, probably not. Finding solid evidence for a civilization that old would be incredibly difficult, and there are two big reasons for that. First, because it's hard to tell when those geological fingerprints are human-made and when they're the result of natural forces. I mean, did the temperature rise during a certain period because of industries, or was it just a natural phenomenon? Here's an example. What's happening to our climate right now looks a lot like certain events in Earth's past called hyperthermals. One of those happened about 55 million years ago, when global temperatures shot up by around 14 degrees Fahrenheit. But hyperthermals usually happen during times of intense tectonic activity, when Earth's plates were shifting and volcanoes were going wild. So in that case, it was natural. But you get the point, right? Maybe there were other events like that in a much older era, that in a rare and unlikely scenario could have been caused by an ancient society. But it would be difficult to tell. There's a reason we might never find their traces. The longer an advanced civilization lasts, the more evidence it leaves behind. But here's the twist. To last that long, they would need to be sustainable. And the more sustainable a society is, the smaller the impact it leaves on the planet. Smaller impact means fewer clues for us to find. Can you see the paradox? The civilizations most likely to survive the longest are the ones that leave the least behind. For example, a society that runs mostly on wind and solar power wouldn't leave nearly as much evidence as one powered by fossil fuels. Okay, so we've got our answer. It would be really hard, if not impossible, to find any evidence that an ancient technological civilization lived here before us. But that doesn't mean they never existed. The truth is, we still don't have proper tools to look that far back into Earth's history in detail. So, maybe we should keep an open mind. Up until now, you've probably pictured this ancient civilization as humanoids, right? You know, 2 legs, 2 arms, walking around like us. But some scientists like to play with a different idea. Maybe we're looking in the wrong place. What if they were sea creatures? I'm talking about cephalopods, ocean animals like octopuses, cuttlefish, and squid. These guys have complex nervous systems and surprisingly sophisticated behavior. They can change color and skin patterns in seconds, send signals like "I'm angry," and even hypnotize their prey. So what if they were the ancient civilization we've been talking about this whole time? Let's start with the light version of the theory. These species could have learned to live together in an organized way, and just like early humans, they might have changed their environment, maybe by farming underwater and hunting some species until they were gone. Maybe that could count as an early stage of a society. Even if that were the case, they never reached what we'd call an advanced stage of civilization. I mean, we don't see squids building spacecraft or octopuses working in IT. They never went through an industrial age or a space age. And if they're not a technological society, then they're not the answer to the Silurian hypothesis. So yeah, we're still left with nothing. And in the scientific community, this whole idea's even got a funny nickname: the most interesting hypothesis that's probably false. But here's the thing. Even if it's a long shot, it still gets scientists asking a big question. What will we humans leave behind millions of years from now? And the answers might actually help us figure out how to look for other advanced species beyond Earth, ones that could have disappeared a long time ago.
There's a place on Earth that looks like it came straight out of the movie Dune. Massive platforms of stone and mud rise in the middle of a scorching desert. And somehow, people manage to survive in such a hostile environment.
Oh, really?
But unlike the movie, this real city in Peru was abandoned over 3,000 years ago and has stayed hidden from us until now. Meet Peñeco. This lost city is located in the Huaura province, north of Lima. After 8 years of excavation and conservation work, some of its secrets have finally been brought to light. It may look eerie and lifeless now, but it wasn't always this way. Experts think this place used to be a busy trading center for ancient Peruvians. In fact, it was part of the oldest known civilization in the Americas, at least as far as we know. And no, they weren't the Mayas or the Aztecs. That's a common mistake. I'm talking about the Caral civilization. This society existed more than 5,000 years ago. That's super old. To put that in perspective, while the Sumerians in Mesopotamia were reaching their peak, and the Egyptians were just starting to build things in Giza. The people in Caral were already building pyramids. Thanks to them, Peru is now seen as one of the 6 places where civilization first began. But unlike the objects we find from ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia, you won't see Caral artifacts in museums, at least not fancy vases covered in mysterious letters, since they didn't know pottery or writing. What they did know was how to build big. They left behind mind-blowing architecture, such as stepped pyramids and huge sunken plazas, like massive open-air arenas big enough to hold hundreds of people. And it's not like they just had one pyramid here and a plaza there. No, as I said, they built big. So far, researchers have found as many as 30 major metropolitan centers across what we now call the Caral region or Peru's north-central coast. You can think of them as full-on cities, with residential areas, several plazas, and ceremonial temples. Their largest pyramid, known as Pirámide Mayor, stands nearly 100 feet tall, with a base covering an area the size of about 4 football fields. That's substantial.
Oh my God!
And building all that surely wasn't easy. It took planning, coordination, and specialists. That suggests that Caral must have had organized labor and strong leadership to pull it off. Despite creating these incredible constructions, Caral cities stayed hidden for thousands of years. And even when researchers first came across the area, it took decades for them to realize how important it really was. They already knew about the ruins back in the 1940s, but it wasn't until the 90s that the first major study of Caral was done. And there's a reason they were ignored for so long. The architecture was so advanced and the proportions so huge that people thought, nah, this has to be something modern. They couldn't have been more wrong, though. And in 2001, studies finally recognized that Caral was the oldest known civilization in the Americas. Archaeologists believe this society existed from around 3,000 to 1,800 years before the Common Era. And for 4,000 years, they flourished in complete isolation. Chances are they never met another civilization at all. This may explain why they are considered such a peaceful society. Researchers haven't found any signs of conflict. No fortifications, no battle gear, no trace of fighting. Instead, they seem more focused on commerce and, well, pleasure. Looks like they love music. In one of the temples, for example, archaeologists found 32 flutes made from bird bones. I wonder what that sounded like. Anyway, the Caral lived along 3 rivers, the Fortaleza, the Patavilca, and the Supe. Just like the newly discovered city of Peñeco, this lost city was built on a natural terrace about 1,970 feet above sea level. And no, they didn't do that for the view, it was for security. Building higher up protected them from flooding, since the site sits parallel to the Supe River. Just recently, after 8 years of excavation, experts finally uncovered its beauty. Altogether, they found 18 structures, including temples, residential complexes, and a huge circular plaza. There are also ceremonial halls built on top of large step platforms, along with stairways, courtyards, and carefully designed walls. These structures serve both practical and symbolic purposes. I mean, this was their hotspot, the place where people came together for rituals. Inside one of the structures, researchers uncovered remarkable finds, like sculptures molded in raw clay that portray human figures, animals, and ceremonial objects. They also dug up stone tools, such as grinders, crushers, and hammers. And remember I said they like music, right? Well, the team also found patutus there. That's like an old-school trumpet made of giant shells brought from the Pacific Ocean. Now, if you look at the map, one thing stands out. Peñeco is farther inland than other Caral cities we've discovered. And that's important. The city's location was completely strategic. And that's why it earned the nickname City of Social Integration. There's this theory that says Peñeco played a key role in trading hematite, a mineral used since ancient times to make red pigment. Back then, this was fancy stuff. Piñeco likely served as a hub linking the coastal and highland villages of Supe and Waura. Maybe they traded hermitite for fish and shellfish from the coastal villagers. But now comes the big question. What happened to the people who lived there? Why was Piñeco completely abandoned after thousands of years? Well, that still remains a mystery. There are different theories about why the Caral Supe civilization disappeared and why their most important cities were left abandoned. One of them is the maritime hypothesis. It suggests that societies first developed along the coast, relying heavily on fishing, and only later moved inland. So, in that view, cities were abandoned as people shifted away from them. But that doesn't fit Piñeco, right? I mean, it's way too far inland to count as a seaside city. So, it's hard to say what really happened. If you look at their main city, archaeologists haven't found any solid evidence of one big disaster. No massive earthquake, no huge flood, nothing like that. And the same goes with Piñeco. There's just no sign of a single event that suddenly wiped them out. The likely explanation is a shift in climate. A change in the weather could have caused long droughts that affected local farming. That would have forced people to abandon their cities, like what happened in northern Mesopotamia. Now, can we say that with absolute certainty? Honestly, no. It's much more likely that several distinct factors led to the decline of that society. They might have also faced some internal conflict, issues of leadership or organization, for example. But that's impossible to prove with archaeology alone. Either way, Piñeco is a huge discovery. It gives us new clues to better understand the crisis the Caral civilization faced before its collapse. But for now, many of their secrets are still waiting to be uncovered. And there's still so much for researchers to figure out about how this civilization was born and how it evolved over time. If you want to visit Piñeco, here's some good news. The site has recently been opened to the public. It's about a 4.5-hour drive from Lima, and you can get there either by a private vehicle or through tourist services. Yeah, it's not the easiest journey, but the breathtaking landscapes will make up for it. And if you don't have the time or the money to fly all the way to Peru, don't worry. If you know Spanish, you can explore a virtual museum dedicated to Caral. It features 10 thematic rooms designed to take you on a journey back to the origins of civilization. You'll find photos, videos, infographics. It's a whole immersive experience. Of course, it's not the same as standing on the site itself, but it still offers a fascinating glimpse into the world of the oldest known civilization in the Americas. Humans invest a lot of time and money exploring the unknown. First outer space, then the ocean floor. But there's another frontier we're trying to conquer. Scientists call it the deep frontier. I'm talking about how far down to the Earth's core we've made it so far. During the 60s, humans tried digging the deepest man-made hole on Earth. This took us deep into the Arctic Circle. What later became known as the super deep borehole is also the deepest artificial point on Earth, reaching the depth of 40,230 feet. It took 20 years to drill this far into the Earth's crust, and researchers say this is only about 1/3 of the way through to the mantle. Here's a quick anatomy of our planet. If the Earth is like an onion, the crust is like the thick skin of this onion. This part is only 25 miles thick. Beyond this is the 1,800-mile deep mantle, and after that, right at the center of the Earth, is the core, which is made up of 2 layers, inner and outer. Now, can you guess where on the planet the crust is at its thinnest? On the ocean floor. When American scientists understood that, they started drilling holes on the seabed. This gave way to Project Mohole. It began in 1961, but their technology to drill deep holes on the ocean was really bad. They had to improvise. They installed a system of propellers along the sides of their drill ship to keep it steady over the hole. The main challenge was to drill as vertically as possible. Otherwise, that deep hole would look more like a deep maze. Both the Kola Super Deep Borehole project and the Project Mohole came to an official stop in the years that followed. But hey, humans have built some pretty deep stuff underground. In 1963, a Turkish man took a swing with his sledgehammer to improve his basement and discovered a tunnel. That tunnel entrance led to more openings that connected a multitude of halls and chambers. He didn't know it, but he had discovered Deringoyu. This once lost city was up to 18 stories tall and 200 feet deep. The city was large enough to host 20,000 people, and it was simply standing beneath Cappadocia in Turkey the whole time. Cappadocia hosts hundreds of subterranean dwellings. 40 of these underground cities are at least 2 stories high, but none of them are as huge as Deringoyu. There's not a lot of historical accounts of how Deringoyu was born. Some speculate that the oldest part of the complex was dug about 2000 BCE by the Hittites. The Hittites were an Indo-European civilization who formed one of the first major civilizations of the Bronze Age in West Asia. Scholars think they built this underground city to protect themselves from invasion. Others think it was actually the Christians who built the city in the 1st century CE. They speculate that it could have been constructed to protect people from the intense temperature variations, extreme heat in summer and freezing cold in winter. Geographically, the terrain under Cappadocia is great for building. The rocks are soft, which makes tunneling easier. For that same reason, opening large caves underground is fragile. That's why most chambers have pillars that support them. On the bright side, and we are, none of the floors at Deringoyu have ever collapsed. The builders of Deringoyu thought of everything. The city was shut off from the world by huge rocks that hid its entrance. It was ventilated by a total of more than 15,000 shafts, around 10 centimeters wide. This way, they guaranteed enough breathing air in the upper levels in a way that they ended up being used as the living and sleeping quarters. The lower levels of this impressive maze were mainly used for storage. But honestly, they had it all: a room for a wine press, for domestic animals, small religious buildings. They certainly didn't spare any efforts to make that underground city as complete as an above-ground one. Now, speaking of impressive underground stuff, Switzerland has the longest tunnel in the world, built here on the Swiss Alps. This absurdly huge tunnel was built over 8,000 feet below the surface. Check this out. This is what the Gotthard-based tunnel looks like. The first idea to build the tunnel was put forward as early as 1947, but construction only officially began in 1999. It took them years to approve the project and then scout for the perfect location. Even so, the 73 different rock types that compose Massif turned the construction into a real challenge. Some of the rocks were as hard as granite, and others were as soft as sandstone. This meant they needed different approaches and equipment so the whole thing wouldn't crumble down. Overall, they had to excavate about 28 million metric tons of rock to make way for the tunnel. There were many other challenges to build that far into the earth. The deeper into the mountain they got, the hotter the temperatures were. Since there's no natural ventilation, temperatures would get as high as 115 degrees Fahrenheit, making it really hard for workers to endure. The tunnel stretches for 35 miles from one end to the other. During the construction, workers had to use 4 massive tunnel boring machines, aka moles, to penetrate through the massif. Each of these moles was around 1,400 feet long. But that was one of the best things they could do, since these machines limit the disturbance to the surrounding ground and help to produce a smooth tunnel wall. You'd never guess that the world's deepest basement belongs to the Sydney Opera House in Australia. The building goes as deep underground as it grows above ground. But this basement isn't just the Opera House's foundation, it's a parking lot. This unique parking garage penetrates 120 feet underground, or 12 stories deep, while most car parks are only 4 or 5 stories deep. But that's not all that makes it unique. You see, if they decided to build a normal rectangular parking space, this would end up eliminating a bunch of possible parking spaces. And since they wanted to maximize the space they had available, they had to come up with some superb structure. First, they opened up a man-made cavern to make that dream possible. Then they had to come up with a design. That's what led to the donut-shaped cavern, or what engineers call a double helix. This design shocked the engineering community for its innovative approach. But hey, it worked. Today, there is space for over 1,000 cars down there, which seems about right for an opera house. Let's wow once again real quick. Some underground structures may take up to an hour to reach. Take this gold mine in South Africa that lies around 2.5 miles below the surface. Yeah, you may think, hey, it's just a couple of miles, why does it take an hour to get there? But the conditions are hard and it's not for the weak. But Milan Ladina, an Ecuadorian runner, even completed a half marathon there, despite temperatures reaching 104 degrees Fahrenheit, high humidity at 80%, and an atmospheric pressure of 1.4, comparable to what divers experience 5 meters under the sea. Yikes. There you are, trekking across a desert on foot. It's hot, you're terribly thirsty, and now you gotta walk around this stupid wall. Wait, a wall in the middle of a sandy, lifeless nowhere? Exactly, a wall in the northern Saudi desert. Archaeologists have just made a super exciting discovery, and what they found was not just a single wall. No, it was a whole ancient walled city that might date back to 2400 BCE. They think this place was home to around 500 people and could have been used for 1,000 years. This discovery is groundbreaking. It means that the area could have been way more advanced than anyone expected. This city was well organized, with different zones for living, towers and strong walls for protection, and different sections for all kinds of daily life. This ancient city, now called Al-Natah, was basically an oasis town, and it's great since it can give us a peek into what life might have been like in this desert thousands of years ago. Apparently, they had clearly separated areas, like residential sections, a cemetery, farmland, and even a town center. This oasis city, found in the Khaybar area, is the first big organized settlement from the 2nd or 3rd millennium BCE that researchers have uncovered in northwestern Arabia. The first surveys show that this town, which covered about 6 acres, had several districts, including the residential area, the cemetery, and the legal one, with courts. The houses were set up in neat rows, all connected by small roads. Those streets kept the residential area separate from the rest of the town. Back then, most people in this region were nomadic herders, always moving around. But archaeologists have been sure that during the Bronze Age, northwest Arabia had small walled towns and oasis centers scattered across it. These connected oasis towns were unique, offering secure places for people to live, store goods, and trade. They started showing the beginnings of urban planning, which hints that people of that time were already starting to settle down and organize communities more seriously. The research team estimated that there were about 50 homes in Al-Natah, but that number could go up to 70 as they keep digging. They think that a few hundred people lived there, and probably one of the coolest things is that some houses went up to 3 stories tall. Built on a slope near a couple of major trade routes, this city was set up in a prime spot. Now, one of the most impressive things about this place is its water supply. The oasis had springs and aquifers, which are underground water sources, and such conditions were perfect for farming. Those water sources meant residents could grow their own food, making the town self-sufficient. The outer walls probably helped control who could enter the town and get access to its resources. This settled way of life was an impressive shift from nomadic living to a more agro-pastoral lifestyle, which means a mix of farming and herding animals. Another find that supports this theory is a bunch of tools, like grinding stones, mortars, and pestles, discovered inside the town. People there must have ground grains and prepared food. They had a diet of cereals, meat, and milk from animals they raised themselves. These astonishing findings show that the inhabitants of the town could easily feed themselves and were surprisingly advanced for that time. Thanks to better access to Saudi Arabia in the past couple of decades, archaeologists now have a much clearer picture of what life there was like thousands of years ago. The most exciting thing is that Al-Natah might have been part of a whole network of similar fortified oasis towns spread across the region, and all of these connected sites could show us how trade routes and small settlements worked together at that time in that arid area. Now, at the same time, this recent discovery isn't the only one that has the scientific world buzzing with excitement. How about we visit Egypt and see for ourselves? After all, archaeologists have just found a stash of ancient Egyptian and Greek treasure underwater. They were exploring the lost city of Thonis Heraklion off the coast of Egypt, which sank more than 1,000 years ago. This city was legendary, and nobody even knew where it was until it was rediscovered in 2000. Now they're uncovering more and more, and on this dive, they found a pile of gold and silver treasures. Those were probably used in rituals to bless Egyptian pharaohs when they took the throne. The researchers even found an ancient Greek temple dedicated to Aphrodite and some super old Greek weapons. Frank Gaudio, the lead archaeologist, said it was astonishing that those delicate objects had survived the disaster that brought the city down. Back in its prime, Thonis Heraklion was one of the biggest port cities in the Mediterranean. It was a huge center of social life and was the main entry point for ships from Greece coming into Egypt. But tragically, due to rising waters, earthquakes, and a catastrophic tidal wave, the soil underneath the city literally turned into mush, and then the entire city sank into the Mediterranean. It was forgotten until Gaudio's team found it in 2000. Since then, they've been uncovering new parts of the city and piecing together its history little by little. If a lost underwater city doesn't seem impressive enough, we can travel to the Amazon. The discovery made there is truly mind-boggling. For centuries, people have talked about lost cities deep in the Amazon, like El Dorado, that mythical city of gold that lured Spanish explorers into the jungle. A lot of them never came back. Then, in the 1900s, a British explorer named Percy Fawcett went searching for what he called the lost city of Z, and he too disappeared. But now, finally, scientists have actually found proof that those lost cities in the Amazon were real all along. A team of scientists use a tech called LiDAR, which basically allows you to see through thick jungle from above by bouncing light beams off the ground. They flew over the jungle in Bolivia in a helicopter about 650 feet up and mapped out those hidden ancient cities. What they found were ruins of a huge urban settlement built by the Kasarabi people who lived there from 500 to 1400 CE. And it wasn't just a couple of buildings here and there. No, the LiDAR maps revealed massive urban centers, pyramids, platforms, roads, canals, and causeways, all carefully laid out. Turns out the Amazon wasn't just an untouched jungle. It was once home to big, complex cities. A scientist from the German Archaeological Institute explained that Europeans had long ignored the possibility of ancient Amazonian cities, but the LiDAR maps showed they were wrong. The new maps have revealed 26 sites, including 11 that no one even knew existed. Researchers have discovered two main city sites, Landivar and Kotoka. They had massive moat causeways stretching out like spokes on a wheel, linking the main cities with smaller surrounding settlements. Some of the canals even connected the cities to rivers and a big lake, which allowed water to flow through the area. Over the years, scientists found scattered ruins all over this region, but the thick jungle made it nearly impossible to connect the dots and see if or how they were related. With LiDAR, the whole layout came to life, showing that those sites were part of a much larger, organized urban system. It's now also clear that the sites had a greater meaning, since everything is lined up in a way that could be symbolic of the spiritual beliefs of the inhabitants. The Kasarabi culture isn't as famous as the Maya, but they had a thriving society in an area that faced huge challenges, like yearly flooding. And although the nearby Andes had their own monumental sites, the Kasarabi were doing something absolutely unique. They even had reservoirs to store water, which suggests they might have been dealing with occasional droughts, which is pretty unusual for the Amazon. Actually, those terrible droughts could be why the Kasarabi eventually left their cities around 1400 CE.